still considered a value whatsoever, as if Rabbi Lewis brings me back. So every time he brings me back, it helps my self-esteem. Thank you very much. Keep bringing me back so my self-esteem remains intact. I want to begin with an unbelievable story. I shared the story a lot of times in the last 6 months. Perhaps the most notable time was the 40 pre-med students at UCLA. And I got a lot of great responses from them, especially because the story's about doctors, but you don't have to be a medical professional to appreciate the story. So in Brooklyn, there was a Hasidic guy, the whole 9 yards, the curly pay, his long black coat. He about in his early 40s, maybe mid 40s, and his name was Avremel. And Avremel was just wasn't feeling good. He was having some health issues. And, his wife kept nudging him, Avremel, go to the doctor, go to the doctor. He's like, nah, it's this, it's that, it's caffeine, it's stress, it's work, it's business, it's the kids. All the excuses you make. Finally goes to the doctor. The doctor runs a battery of tests, and the results come back, and it ain't. He has an advanced form. The doctor says to him, listen, I'm not a world expert, but you're lucky you live in Brooklyn, and Sloan Kettering is in Manhattan. Go to Sloan and see if they can help. So Avremel goes to Sloan, and they look at all his test results, and they realize it's not a simple situation, to put it mildly. But they try, and they begin an aggressive battery of treatments to try to save his life. He was a father of kids, a brother, a child, a valued community member, a valuable human being. And the treatment is aggressive, and it's so invasive, and it's really killing him. Between the treatment and his illness, things just go from bad to worse. He's got zero quality of life, and he's in the hospital and can't keep anything down, and he's losing weight. We should never have to know about these type of things, but stuff is really, really bad. And one day, after a regimen of treatments, he's lying in bed. His family had gone home. It's probably about 8 o'clock at night. He just says, you know what? I can't anymore. Whatever quality of life I had left, I have as being robbed from me. It's just not fair. I'd rather live my last few months in peace and tranquility than have to live this way. And he decides that going forward, he's discontinuing treatment. He'll go into hospice, and at least he'll have a quality of life. He'll spend time at home with his family and his loved ones and do the things, I guess, that he can still do. But they keep him in the hospital for a few more days. And next week, one night, the doctor walks into his room in the hospital, and he says to him, Mr. Avremel. He says, yes. He goes, my name is Dr. Jack. I'm the head of oncology at Sloan Kettering, and I've been reviewing your particular illness and your particular situation. I heard that you want to discontinue treatments. I'd like to offer you one last hope. It's not an easy one. It is a incredibly invasive surgery. We go in there and we clean everything out. Some people don't make it. Even those that do, it's not guaranteed. It's a shot. What do you think? Is it something that you're even interested in? And the doctor's almost shocked enough. Avremel jumps out of his bed with his last strength, and he goes, of course I'm interested. I'm a fighter. I'm not going to give up without a fight. All right, can I go into surgery tomorrow? Dr. Jack says, well, relax. We got to make sure that everything is okay. The soonest date that we have to take you in, we'll take you in. A week later, they wheel Avremel on a gurney into the hospital, into the operating theater. He says goodbye to his wife and his kids and his parents and his siblings. And with a prayer on his lips, he goes under. And thus begins an incredibly invasive surgery. 10 hours later, he's wheeled out, more dead than alive, stitched up to the wazoo, stapled out of this world. And recovery is grueling. Forget about everything that did. It's not just so much invasion. And there's ups and there's downs, and it's not easy, et cetera, et cetera. But 8 weeks later, Avremel walks out of the hospital on his own 2 feet, cancer-free, with a T-shirt from Sloan Kettering. I am the Sloan Kettering story. Amazing story. The story is just beginning. Because a month later, Avremel, when he's feeling really much better, decides to make what we call in Hebrew a seudas hoda'ah, a meal of gratitude. And he invites to this meal everyone that was involved in his last half a year to a year of his life. He invites his siblings and his children and his in-laws and his parents and his family members and volunteers. He also invites many of the medical professionals at Sloan that were so devoted and so dedicated to his care. And of course, you can imagine, He invites Dr. Jack, the man that saves his life. And it's a really beautiful event. It's catered, and there's speeches, and there's music, and there's singing, and there's tears, and there's smiles, and it's so special. But the last speech of the night, or so it was supposed to be, was Avram. And he gets up there, and first and foremost, he thanks God. And then he thanks his wife, literally his rock. And he thanks his children and all the people that prayed for him. And he thanks the incredible, dedicated, and devoted staff at Sloan. But he saves the best for last. And he says, Dr. Jack, you're my last thank you. You're thinking that I'm going to get up right now and I'm going to say, Dr. Jack, you saved my life by giving me this life-saving surgery. You saved my life. Thank you so much. I can never repay you. I'm not going to thank you for the surgery. Not even a drop. Dr. Jack's a little bit taken aback, head of oncology. So, Dr. Jack, I want to thank you for something that you don't even know about. What says Dr. Jack? What are you talking about? He says, the night, about a week before you came into my room to suggest the surgery, it was at night and I had given up. I was planning on calling into hospice, as you heard, et cetera, et cetera. And I heard a conversation in the hall. The conversation was between you and one of the residents. And the conversation wasn't even about me. It was about a guy 3 doors down who I'd gotten to know. And I'll share with you the conversation. Let me know if you remember. What's the conversation? Says Dr. Jack, I have no recollection. He says, the resident says, you know the guy 3 doors down, that guy over there? He doesn't have a shot. He's not going to make it. And you, Dr. Jack, turned to him and said, you're wrong. Because I'm doing this for 3 decades. And that guy is a fighter. And fighters have a shot, even when all the odds are stacked against them. I wouldn't be surprised if that guy survives. I don't know how, and I don't know when, but if he does, you heard it here first. Says Avremel, I'm lying in my bed, and I hear Dr. Jack saying that if you're a fighter, you can defeat the odds. And I said to myself, Avremel, are you a fighter? You just gave up. Is that how a fighter goes down? At least give one last attempt. One last good fight. One last battle. Doctor, remember when you came into my room a few days later and you asked me if I want the surgery? And I jumped out of my bed and I said, yes, I'm a fighter. That's because of the conversation we had that I overheard the week before. Doctor, you saved my life, but it wasn't just the surgery that saved my life. You saved my life because you gave me the will to go. Thank you, doctor. For that, I can never repay. The doctor stands up and he begins to cry. And his shoulders are heaving and the tears are screaming on his face. Mr. Professional Polished. And he's crying like a little baby. And Avremel goes over and he puts his arm around the doctor and he says, doctor, relax, what's going on? We're all emotional tonight. It's okay. Dr. Jack says, I'm sorry. I'm not crying because you think the reason you think I'm probably inspired. I saved a life. He says, no, these are tears of the greatest pain. These are tears of agony, of remorse. I just realized right now how many people for the last 3 decades, I told them, sorry, there's nothing we can do. How many doors I shut in people's faces. How many lights I extinguished by extinguishing the last hope in these people's lives. Imagine, said Dr. Jack, if I would have told the people, listen, if you're a fighter, you have a chance. There's still a chance. Never give up. Could be I could have saved hundreds, maybe thousands of people. But I didn't do that. I was honest with them, which is what we're taught to be. And I said, listen, there's nothing we could do. And then that was the end. That's what I'm crying for. I didn't realize the power that I held in my hand, the power of life and death. And the doctor starts a bout of fresh tears. And Avremel, like only a Hasidic guy, says to him, he says, doctor, this is not how we do it in our community. We don't just stand there crying. It doesn't work that way. When you have a problem, you solve it. Doctor, he says, you're here in front of all your nurses. You're here in front of all your people. He says, why don't you commit in front of all of them that you're never going to shut the door in anyone's face? And you're never going to extinguish that last flickering flame of hope. And who knows, you can reverse a trend and have the best numbers in the field of oncology. Come on, doctor, say it. Dr. Jack wipes his tears and he says, okay, my dear medical professionals, and you heard it here first. I'm changing my MO. And going forward, myself and all of us, we're going to be more positive. And hopefully, by saying things positively and thinking positively, we'll have positive results. True story, didn't happen that long ago. Happened about an hour away at Sloan Kettering Hospital. Ladies and gentlemen, We see from this story so many great things. And I could give a speech on many different topics and use this story as an opener. But today I want to pull out one thing, and that is what I like to call positive word. We have no idea how much power we have with our speech. It can build and it can destroy. It can create and it can obliterate. It can save and it can decimate. Small words have the power to do incredible things. They also have the power to be so incredibly destructive. The pasuk teaches us, the verse teaches us in Mishlei in Proverbs in chapter 12, Yesh boteh kemad keros charef. There's blunt talk, like sword thrusts. Ulshon chachamim marbe. But the speech of the wise is healing. Some people, through their blunt talk, literally, it's like taking a sword and sticking it into someone's heart. Yet wise people, their speech is incredibly healing. And we all have both bookends in our lives. We have the potential through wise speech to build, to create, to save, to do amazing things. We also have the same potential to break down and to destroy. Do you know how many words a day a human being says? What do you think? How many words does an average human being say in one day? I don't want to guess. One random person, just, shout it out. I don't know. Or post it on the chat. I never knew. Now, I'm a big talker, so I don't fit in the parameters of normal people. I don't want to try to guess. All right. Too many people here to do this with. A regular person says a minimum of 40,000 words a day. 40,000 words a day. I'm more observant and stricter when it comes to speech, so I say 400,000 words a day. But most people say 40,000 words a day. It reminds me, I was once on a payphone. Guys don't know you don't know what a payphone is, right? It's whatever. It's like from the movies, that thing that you. So I was on a payphone in Israel. I was studying in yeshiva, and it was lunch break. I didn't used to go home by lunch break. I used to stay. My wife was working, and I was learning. So I was on the phone, and I was on the phone for 10 minutes. And about 3 minutes in, this guy comes there. He wants to use the payphone. So I ignored him. I was there first. It's Israel. Hello, it's my phone. What do you mean? I own the company. What are you talking about? Way to go. 10 minutes later, I hang up. So the guy looks at me. He goes to me. He says to me, typical Hebrew, he says to me, what are you talking about already? Who could talk for 10 minutes? I said, Adoni, sir, I was talking to my wife. She spoke for 9 minutes and I spoke for 1. It worked out well. Anyways, the average American or the average human being says 40,000 words a day. Of those 40,000 words, now here I have no statistics. What percentage do you think are positive and what percentage do you think are negative and what percentage do you think are neutral? Something very important and something that we have to think about. There was a fellow who unfortunately was guilty of very negative speech. He spoke nasty about other people. He spoke harsh to people. He was a condescending person. And he got a little older in life. And he decided that he wants to do tshuva. He needs to repent. He's hurt so many people. So he went to the Chafetz Chaim. We've all heard of the Chafetz Chaim. Chafetz Chaim was the man who wrote the book on positive word power. I'm not speaking Lashon Hara. So he said to Chafetz Chaim, he says, Rabbi, you got to tell me, how do I atone for this terrible sin of speaking negatively to people, about people? Famous story, says the Chafetz Chaim, simple. Go to town. There's a guy who sells pillows. And in those days, the pillows were stuffed with down feathers, right? He says, here's what you got to do. Buy a beautiful, big, oversized, queen-size down feather pillow. Buy a knife. Slit the pillow straight down the midsection. And hold it out. He says, what's going to happen? He goes, the wind's going to blow the feathers in every single way. Right, says the Chafetz Chaim. That's what you got to do. Okay, Rabbi, and then what? And then go and pick up every single feather that blew away. He says, Rabbi, that's not possible. How can you pick up every single feather that blew away? Says the Chafetz Chaim, you're right. It's not possible. There's no way, once a word leaves your mouth, to ever get it back. Positively and negatively. You say a positive comment, it endures forever. You say a negative comment, it's like your digital fingerprint. It comes back to haunt you. It never, ever moves away. It's interesting that this talk would have been perfect if 30 years ago, 25 years ago. We just talk about the ramifications of our spoken word. In the days of the Chavetz Chaim, maybe it was what you wrote, what you spoke. But now, with modern technology, it's not just the spoken word or the written word, it's the images, it's the emojis, it's the hashtags. Anyone ever hear about the hashtag pretty plain girl? I don't remember, that was 2 years ago. Pretty plain girl? Okay, plain here is not plain like blah. Plain is airplane. What's pretty plain girl? Hashtag pretty plain girl. So hashtag pretty plain girl was the following story. There was a boyfriend and a girlfriend on a plane. They come onto the plane and they have different seats, but they want to sit next to one another. Do you blame them? So they found this guy who he was supposed to sit next to, and the girl that she was supposed to sit next to. They said, guys, could you do us a favor? Could you sit next to each other so that we could sit next to each other? And they're like, sure. The guy was an attractive, well-endowed fellow, like my high school kids would say. He was ripped. The girl was an attractive girl. And they're like, this boyfriend and girlfriend are talking the whole time. Oh my gosh, we probably introduced them. They're going to get married. We're going to be best men. And they start taking pictures of them and putting them on social media. And the story didn't just make it amongst their peer groups. It made international headlines. And people started following who this guy, who, by the way, was a former professional soccer player. And she was a regular girl, somewhat, I guess she was attractive. And all of a sudden, all the news outlets are carrying and following Plain Girl and Pretty Plain Girl and seeing, are they going to end up getting married? It's going to be like The Bachelorette, or it's going to be like one of those things. And the guy, he played the game. He was on all the night TV shows and the syndicates and stuff like that. And then about 2 days later, all of a sudden, a lawyer comes and says, you know what? This girl doesn't want that type of life. Starting her life, she's starting her career. She was on the plane next to the guy, and they had a nice conversation, and it was videoed in this position and that position, and then walking off the plane together, and all of a sudden, a whole world was created. Please stop talking about it, but it was too late. It was way too late. Way too many people had viewed it. Too many people had seen it, and it's too late. You could never collect all those feathers. That's the power of our speech. It's also the power of what we write, what we type, what we swipe. Crazy stuff, but we have that power positively. We have that power negatively. I got to share with you something so scary. I was at a bar mitzvah about 2 years ago, and I met a woman there, a middle-aged woman, upper middle-aged woman, and she shared with me a heartbreaking thing. She was walking on Coney Island Avenue. You guys know where that is? Lots of kosher stuff and all kinds. Coney Island Avenue. And she saw 5 15-year-olds, 14-year-olds, and they were smoking tobacco. They were smoking cigarettes. And it bothered her. She's like, if this was my kid, I wouldn't want my kid smoking at the age of 14 and 15. Wait till you get older. Or like I tell my kids, I have no issue. You could smoke all you want. Smoke meat. Don't smoke cigarettes. So she goes over to them and she says to these kids, guys, 15, don't start. You're ruining your life at such a young age. It's so not healthy and it's so expensive. Blah, 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 blah. They laughed at her. All right. She walks away and she had no idea that one of the boys videoed her saying this. And then he stitched a very popular song to this woman saying the words. If you're 15, this takes you 2 seconds to do it. And he posts it on social media and it goes viral. And the woman said she had no idea about this until a week later she traveled to Israel and she's walking to Jerusalem and someone comes over and says, oh my gosh, you're the cigarette lady. She's like, what cigarette lady? And pulls out the video and shows it to her. This conversation that she had with me was a year or two later, and she says she's embarrassed to go out. She only goes to weddings and bar mitzvahs when she has to because people recognize her as the cigarette lady. Look at the power of taking a person's words and corrupting them. So it's a whole new world right now when we speak about positive or negative word power. But let's see the flip side. Let's see the amazing power of positive word power. There's a great story that came out about 10 years ago, not a Jewish story, it's a human story, of a particular young man who was, by the time he got to 6th grade, was the nightmare of the institution. I'm an educator. I've taught a lot of kids over the years. We have nightmares sometimes. And the nightmare is about this kid. You didn't want him in your class. He would destroy everything. You didn't want him in your gym class. You didn't want him by lunch. You didn't want him in the building. He was a terror of terrors. You can't even imagine. This kid, he's in 6th grade, and things are really bad. He's being threatened about being kicked out of the school, it's suspended, his parents don't know, no one knows what to do. And one day he comes into school and he turns a whole new leaf, becomes a regular kid. By the time he goes to 8th grade graduation, he's one of the best kids in the class, an entire grade. At the graduation, one of the teachers had the courage to go over to him and said, dude, what did they promise you? What was the incentive? How did you go from being a zero to a hero overnight? It's not important. But the teacher pesters him and says, no, I'm a teacher. I need to know. If not for you, for someone else. He says, I'm going to tell you what happened. The day before I changed, I was sent to the principal's office, and I'd been threatened so many times, I knew it was bad. I'm sitting there at the principal's office, and he's telling me off when his secretary comes in and says that the superintendent is on the phone. And he says, tell the superintendent that I'm in a very important meeting with a very important person. I'll call him back when I'm done. And he continued the conversation and told me he was going to give me one last chance. That night, I'm lying in bed, and I'm thinking to myself, important conversation with an important person. Who's the meeting? And I realized the principal thinks I'm important. I'm not important. I'm terrible. I'm a terror. No, maybe he does think I'm important. I'm more important than the superintendent, his boss. And I said, if he sees value in me, maybe there is value. And slowly but surely, I changed. Today, I'm a regular kid. I'm a thriving, successful kid. Because one person said one sentence and probably didn't even have intention when he said it. Look at the power that a person has by saying something positive. The Pasuk says in Mishlei, in Proverbs again, Hachayim v'hamaves biyad halashon. Life and death are in the hands of our tongue. I'm going to share with you one sentence, and I'm going to say the exact same words, and I will show you the power of life and death in the sentence. Well, not life and death, but success and failure. Here's a drop of background before I say the sentence. There was a young kid who grew up in the projects in Newark. By the time he was 9 or 10 years old, many of his friends were already dealing drugs. Some of them had already been starting to get into gangs. For some reason, he said, I don't want that life. I never met my dad. I see the horror. I see the violence. I want better. I'm not getting involved. And he tried his hardest to always stay away from what many of the kids were doing. And he promised himself that he was going to graduate high school. There were many times that he studied for tests and did assignments in stairwells where there was literally bullets ricocheting. But he persevered. And by the time he graduated high school, he had very high marks on his SATs and his ACTs, and he got a full scholarship to Harvard University. He goes to Harvard University, and he graduates Harvard University Business School. He's the first person that's graduated college probably in 500 years in his family, and probably one of the only people in his immediate community and peer group. He gets a great job in a corporation. And he's a hard worker, and he's a dedicated guy, and he climbs the corporate ladder. By the time he's in his early 40s, he's the vice president of a Fortune 500 company. And that month, after he got his position as vice president, the competing company's president stepped down for personal reasons. They're looking for a new president, a new CEO. And his name comes across the desk. So the chairman of the board of their competitor calls one of the guys on the board of this Fortune 500 company to find out about George. And here's how the conversation went. I'm going to say the same sentence, but I'm going to say it differently. Listen carefully. The first option, the fellow on the board says, George, the kid grew up in the projects, made it to Harvard, and today he's the vice president of a Fortune 500 company. Good shot that George is going to get the job. Now listen to what he says, but we'll say it a little bit differently. The kid is from the projects. He made it to Harvard. He's the vice president of our company. He's not going to get the job. Same words. The intonation was different. That's the power of life and the power of death. Rabbi Lewis, how much longer do I have? I can't hear you because you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, a few more minutes.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Fine. I want to share two more things. Number one, I want to share, after thinking and reading into this concept of work power over the years, I want to share 3 or 4 scenarios, practical things that I think we all could think about. And if we thought about them more often, it would elevate, upgrade our work power and make it so much more positive. Number one, guys, this is not profound, but it's so simple, but it's so true. When we're hungry and we're tired, we need to be really careful what we say. I am guilty of this more than most people. After a long day at work, I come home and there's a lot of noise in my house. There's kids and there's this and there's that. You have to be so careful. Just because you're feeling whatever you're feeling, no one else is guilty because of your feelings. It's at that point that you got to get a hold of yourself and you got to be in control of what you say. Just piece of advice number one. Piece of advice number two. When you're frustrated by an interaction with somebody, don't be cynical. Don't be sarcastic. On the contrary, you want to win, be the positive one. It's the best piece of advice ever. First of all, a little bit in the cynical way, if someone's mad at you and you're calm, it gets even more mad. It's so amazing. It makes you feel so great. And second of all, bottom line is you don't get anywhere by being angry, by being in their face, by being negative and cynical and edgy. On the contrary, you always get further by being a mensch. Number 4, when we're really angry at someone and we want to let them know how we feel, even if we have to share the way we're feeling, we have to do it with control, without belittling the person, without shaming them, just giving it over. I'm telling you, as a rabbi and someone who's involved in administration and many different facets of life, people have a lot of tempers and sometimes they need to be redirected. Do it respectfully, you do it kindly. You start off praising them and showing them you care about them, you have a shot. If not, you're dead on arrival. And finally, when you just, this applies probably every single conversation you ever have in your life, the most important and the hardest thing to keep in mind is think before you speak. Because once the words are out, it's too late. Never take back what you say. Can't tell you how many times I kick myself. I wish I would have just thought for one more second. And I wouldn't have said that. Now I can't rectify it. I can't repair what I said. And the other way around also, if you think before you say something positively, you can't imagine. I'll just give you an example as a teacher, as an educator. When you need to redirect a kid, there's 2 ways to do it. You could be condescending, you could tell them off, you could give them a tongue lashing, or you could do it the exact opposite way and it's so much more effective. Timmy, you're a great kid. You know, you've been doing really well. What happened today is so uncharacteristic of you. I know that you can do better. I expect more from you. You're just not that type of kid. Timmy will listen if you do it the second way. He won't listen if you do it the first way. It's like that, not just with students, it's like with human beings, with our spouses, our friends, everybody around us. So let's take a little bit of time to think before we speak. And think about speaking in general. It'll upgrade our life in the most amazing way. I'll conclude by saying every day, when we say the Amida, the silent devotion, right when we finish, we say 3 or 4 incredibly powerful words. Elokai, my God. Nitzor lishoni meira. God, protect my tongue from evil. Help me think before I speak. Help me just take that one split moment and somehow give a drop of focus or concentration before I speak, because then I probably won't say the evil thing. On the contrary, I'll say it in a positive way, and I'll be so much more effective, impactful, and I'll feel so much greater about myself. Thank you, Rabbi Lewis, for the opportunity. Let's take this to heart. And for the next week, let's try once a day to say something positive if we were going to say negative. And even if we can't say negative, let's at least try to find something extra positive to say to somebody. It'll help them. It'll help us. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Have a wonderful night, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.